What if I told you that Christ revealed a technique so threatening to the established order that every trace of it was systematically erased from accepted scripture? In the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, recovered from Nag Hammadi among texts the institutional church attempted to destroy forever, there exists a passage that changes everything we think we know about spiritual warfare. Mary describes her ascension through 7 realms where hostile entities attempted to block her path at every gate. A disciple asks the question that unveils the secret. How did you perceive them? How did you know of their presence? Her answer couldn't remain in canonical texts. Christ taught us to activate the eyes that perceive beyond ordinary sight, not metaphorical, spiritual vision, but actual physical seeing, with your biological eyes open. This wasn't symbolic language. This was practical instruction, because when these entities become visible to you in material form, they lose their most devastating weapon. Their greatest advantage has never been raw power, its invisibility. These beings operate within frequencies that remain imperceptible to most human awareness, which allows them to attach to your energetic field, inject thoughts into your consciousness, manipulate your emotional responses, and you remain completely unaware of their presence. Every impulse feels like your own. Every fear seems to originate within you. Every self-sabotaging pattern appears to be your personal failure. But the instant you can see them, the moment your physical eyes gain the ability to perceive entities operating just outside normal visual range, the entire dynamic transforms. You cannot be manipulated by what you're consciously observing. You cannot be controlled by what you recognize as separate from your own being. Christ didn't teach the chosen to sense these entities spiritually. He taught them to see these beings with eyes wide open in waking consciousness, not during meditation, not in altered states, but in ordinary reality. Because that's precisely where they exist, right here. Operating just beyond the frequency range your eyes were programmed to detect. And the moment you learn to shift your visual perception even by the smallest degree, they become visible. And that visibility represents the one thing they fear above any prayer, any ritual, any spiritual practice you could perform. Before we proceed to the technique itself, you must understand why these entities have invested tremendous energy into remaining invisible to human perception. They're not naturally invisible. They're not incorporeal ghosts floating without form. They possess tangible structure. They exist within dimensions that overlap and intersect with physical reality, but they operate at frequencies deliberately offset from the range human eyes were designed to perceive. And that offset is an accidental, it's architectural, part of the prison design itself. When the demiurge constructed the human body, he engineered the visual system to perceive only a minuscule fraction of what actually exists here. Your eyes detect visible light, the electromagnetic spectrum, between approximately 380 and 700 nanometers. That's the extent of your natural range. But reality doesn't cease existing outside those parameters. Infrared radiation is present. Ultraviolet light is here. And these entities exist in frequencies positioned just adjacent to what your eyes can naturally detect, close enough to interact with you, distant enough that you can't observe them doing it. Consider how much simpler it becomes to control someone who cannot see you. You can position yourself behind them and whisper suggestions into their mental space, and they'll believe those thoughts originated within their own consciousness. You can generate emotional states within their field, and they'll assume those emotions are authentic responses to their circumstances. You can attach energetic cords to their subtle body and drain their vitality, and they'll simply feel mysteriously exhausted without understanding why. Invisibility isn't merely an advantage for these beings, it's the foundational pillar of the entire control architecture. But here's what the Gnostic mystics discovered, and the institutional church fought desperately to bury. The human eye possesses more flexibility than the demiurge anticipated. Yes, it was designed to perceive only a narrow frequency band, but it can be trained. The mechanism already exists within you. You don't require new eyes. You need to activate the capacity your current eyes already possess, but that's been suppressed since birth. Because if every human could see these entities, the harvest system would collapse instantly. You cannot feed upon someone who's watching you feed. You cannot manipulate someone who sees your hand on the controls. Chosen individuals who master the ability to see these entities report an identical experience. The instant visibility occurs, the power dynamic inverts completely. Before, you felt attacked by invisible forces with no comprehension of their origin. After, you see exactly what's happening. You see the entity itself. You see the attachment point. You see the energetic cord. And the moment you see it, the entity knows you see it, and it panics because its cover has been completely blown. And these beings operating without cover are weak, desperate, and easily dismissed. The technique Christ taught has nothing to do with developing clairvoyance or psychic abilities. It's about expanding the range of what your physical eyes can detect. And the mechanism is simpler than most people imagine, which is precisely why the Church had to suppress it so aggressively. If this were complex, if it demanded years of dedicated training, they could have allowed it to exist as an esoteric practice only mystics would pursue. But it's not complex. Most chosen ones activate this ability within the first 7 days of correct practice. And once it activates, it doesn't deactivate. You cannot unsee what you've trained yourself to perceive. Your eyes don't merely receive light, they interpret frequency, and that interpretation happens in the brain, not in the eye itself. The eye captures raw data. The brain decides what qualifies as real and what gets filtered into oblivion. And from the moment of birth, your brain has been filtering out the frequencies where these entities exist. Not because those frequencies aren't reaching your retina. They are, but because your brain was programmed to categorize them as visual noise and delete them before they reach conscious awareness. But that filter isn't permanent. It's malleable, adaptable, reprogrammable, and the way you recalibrate it is by training your visual attention to notice what's normally discarded and deleted. You've probably experienced this already without recognizing what you are actually perceiving. You're alone in a room. The lighting is dim, and in your peripheral vision, you detect movement, a shadow that shifts, a shape that doesn't belong. You turn to look directly at it, and it vanishes instantly. Most people dismiss that experience as imagination, fatigue, or eyes playing tricks. But chosen ones who've learned to see recognize what that actually represents. Your peripheral vision momentarily detecting an entity before your central vision's filter engaged and erased it. Peripheral vision operates fundamentally differently than central vision. Central vision is sharp, focused, optimized for detailed observation. Peripheral vision is optimized for detecting movement and subtle environmental changes. And peripheral vision has access to a slightly wider frequency range than central vision possesses. That's why you see things in the corner of your eye that disappear when you look directly. Your peripheral vision captured something your central vision's filter refuses to allow. The technique Christ taught exploits this gap in your visual processing. You're not attempting to see these entities with direct focus. You're training your peripheral awareness to hold what it's detecting long enough for your conscious mind to register it. And once your brain realizes that what it's been filtering out is consistently present, not random, not imagination, but actual presence, the filter begins to relax. And then you start seeing them. Not just in peripheral flashes, but in sustained perception, with your eyes fully open in normal waking consciousness. Here's the technique, and it's called soft gaze. Every mystery tradition that taught students to perceive non-physical entities used some version of this method. You're going to practice this starting tonight. And within 3 to 7 days, you'll see your first entity, not feel it, but see it with physical eyes. Find a space where you can sit comfortably with low lighting, not complete darkness, but low lighting. Dim enough that shadows possess depth, but bright enough that you can still clearly see physical objects. The reason for this is that these entities become more visible when contrast exists. Pure darkness provides them too much cover. Bright light forces them to retreat, but low light with shadows, that's where they operate most boldly, because they assume you still cannot see them. Sit facing a wall or an open space, not a screen, not something with detail that will pull your focus. You want a neutral visual field, and then you soften your gaze. This is absolutely critical to success. Most people, when they try to see something, concentrate harder. They narrow their attention. They attempt to look directly at what they're searching for. That's exactly wrong for this purpose. You're doing the opposite. You're widening your gaze, relaxing your eye muscles, allowing your vision to go slightly out of focus so that you're not looking at anything specific. You're simply seeing the entire field all at once. This will feel uncomfortable initially because you're not accustomed to seeing this way. Your eyes want to focus. Your brain wants a target. But you keep the gaze soft, loose, receptive instead of searching. And while you hold that soft gaze, you're paying attention to your peripheral awareness, not moving your eyes toward it. Just noticing what exists in the edges of your vision while your central vision stays soft and unfocused. Within the first few minutes, you'll start noticing things you normally filter out. Tiny movements in the air, shadows that shift when nothing physical is moving, shapes that don't correspond to any object in the room. Most people's first instinct is to look directly at those shapes, and the moment they do, the shapes vanish. That's the filter activating. Your central vision's programming is still deleting what peripheral vision detected. So you don't look directly. You keep your gaze soft. You acknowledge the movement in your peripheral awareness, but you don't chase it with focus. You simply hold the soft gaze and allow your brain to slowly realize that what you're seeing in the periphery isn't disappearing, it's consistent. It's present. And over the course of 7 to 10 minutes of practice, your brain starts allowing more of what peripheral vision is detecting to reach conscious awareness. The filter begins to relax, and that's when you'll see your first one. It won't look how you expect it. These entities don't appear as solid three-dimensional beings. They appear as semi-transparent distortions in the air, like heat waves, like a shimmer that has vague shape but no defined edges. Some chosen ones describe them as shadows with depth, others as dark smoke that moves with intention. Others as vaguely humanoid figures that seem to be made of static or interference patterns. What you see will depend on which type you're perceiving and how dense its manifestation is in that moment. The first time you see one clearly, your immediate reaction will be to question whether you're actually seeing it or imagining it. That doubt is completely normal. But here's how you'll know it's real. It will react to your attention. The moment you perceive it clearly, it will move either toward you to intensify its influence or away from you because it recognizes it's been seen. That movement, that response to your awareness, that's what confirms you're not imagining it. Imagination doesn't react to being observed, but actual entities do. Once your eyes learn to detect these beings, you'll start seeing them in places you didn't expect. And what you'll notice immediately is how common they are. They're not rare. They're absolutely everywhere. Most people are walking around with at least one entity attached to their field at any given time. And in certain environments, churches, government buildings, hospitals, places where emotional density is high, you'll see dozens of them clustered together. The first place most chosen ones notice them is in their own home. You'll be sitting in your living room and you'll catch movement in the corner. You'll soften your gaze and you'll see it a dark shape hovering near the ceiling or pressed into a corner, just watching. Most of the time, it's not actively attacking. It's observing, waiting for an emotional spike, fear, anger, lust, despair it can feed upon. And the moment you generate that emotion, it moves closer. You'll see it approach. You'll see it position itself near your head or your chest, and you'll feel the energetic drain happen in real time. But here's what makes visibility so powerful. The moment you see it, the moment you recognize what it's doing, the feeding stops working, because you're no longer unconsciously generating the emotion. You're conscious of it. You're watching it. And conscious emotion doesn't feed these entities the way unconscious emotion does. They need you unaware. They need you thinking the emotion is entirely yours. The second you recognize there's an entity attempting to harvest that emotion, the emotional state shifts. It becomes information instead of food. You'll also start seeing them attached to other people. This is harder to witness because you'll realize how many people you interact with daily are being actively manipulated and have no idea. You'll be talking to someone and you'll see an entity perched on their shoulder or wrapped around their head. And when they say something cruel or irrational or self-destructive, you'll see the entity pulse. You'll see it tighten its grip. And you'll recognize immediately that thought didn't originate with them, it was implanted. Some chosen ones report seeing these beings in specific locations consistently. Certain corners of certain rooms, doorways, thresholds, mirrors. These are anchor points, places where the veil between dimensions is thin enough that they can maintain a more stable presence. And once you know where the anchor points are in your home, you can clear them, not through ritual, but through awareness. You look directly at the space, you acknowledge what's there, and you speak, "I see you. You have no power here. Leave." And most of the time it does. Not because you banished it with spiritual authority, but because you removed its cover. And these entities don't stay where they're consistently seen. Christ taught chosen ones how to see these beings with physical eyes, not spiritual vision, but actual seeing, because visibility is the one thing they fear more than any prayer or spiritual practice. When you can see them, you can't be convinced you're imagining the attack. You're watching it happen, and conscious observation breaks the feeding mechanism. The technique is soft gaze, low lighting, relaxed focus, peripheral awareness. You practice for 10 minutes daily for 7 days, and you'll see your first one. And once you see it, once you've confirmed for yourself that these entities are real and present and operating all around you, everything changes. You're not defending blind anymore. You're navigating a visible field, and that visibility is power they can't take from you. If you're committing to the 7-day visibility practice, comment "I see them now" below. Subscribe for advanced seeing techniques. Like this video so other chosen ones discover what's been hidden. Practice tonight, they're already there.